Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon to you all, depending on where you are joining from. So, firstly, on behalf of Precision Technologies, I would like to thank each one of you for joining us today. I'm your host, Rupesh Mainampati. I am the AVP for Client Relations here at Precision. I have with me Dipali Kadakban, CEO of Precision Technologies, and Larry Hemley, Marketing Head at Precision Technologies Corp. So, as you must be aware already by now, this event is being organized by us at Precision. So, we are a leading full stack IT company with a diversified portfolio of services ranging from agile transformation to application and mobile development, automation, data analytics, Salesforce solutions, and more. So, we also provide technology staffing services. So, today we have an amazing panel to discuss on digital transformation in 2020 and beyond. Our goal today is that you all will be able to take away something, maybe a new idea or a fresh perspective or even a new strategy that you can apply to be more successful in your business or career. So, to give you an idea of what to expect, here's the format. I'll take a few moments to briefly introduce all our panelists here. Then Larry will kick off the conversation, asking questions that draw out some of the high-level themes and ideas we should be thinking about. We then have a Q&A session where our panelists would answer any questions that you all may have on this topic. And after the Q&A session, Depali shall wrap up the event with her closing comments. By the way, please do not wait till the end to post your questions. You may post them at any time starting from now. When the Q&A session begins, I would pick them up and read them out to our panelists. And if we aren't able to cover all the questions, we promise to get them answered later and we'll share with you all via email. Sounds good? Great. So let's get started with the panel introductions. Our first panelist today is Julio Lujambio. He is the global head of digital and mobile service delivery at Alexion Pharmaceuticals. Then we have Sarah Angel Johnson, currently the CIO at Europe, and is in transition to becoming the CIO at Save the Children. Our third panelist is Mr. Vishal Gupta, the global CTO and senior VP for technology at Unisys. Then we have Tom Daly, the former global director of global IT applications at Gerber. Also, he's just starting at Estee Lauder. Here, I must mention that all our panelists have significantly transformed their respective organizations and passionately came forward to share their knowledge and experiences with us in this forum. I'm super excited to host them and eagerly looking forward to hear their thoughts on the subject. So without any further delay, I request Larry to take over the session from here on. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. We really appreciate you joining us today. This has been a labor of love to put together, to be able to share content with you and really give you feedback and insight from experts. When we began 2020, with topics like artificial intelligence, machine learning, virtual reality, big data, blockchain, IoT, and more, that I think that digital transformation is now thought of more and completely differently than it was pre-pandemic. Thanks to the pandemic, nearly every business, small and large, has had to look at their business processes, business model, organizational culture, and more to determine how they needed to reshape their business. Because of the difference between all of our businesses, digital transformation will look different for every company. It can be hard to pinpoint a definition that applies to all of us. Today, we've gathered a great team of panelists that have been in your shoes and are willing to share their insights. There are many questions that we have fielded from clients with everything from what is digital transformation to how will it drive our company's success to how can I be sure that we address the most important elements and much more. A quick note for housekeeping, as Rupesh mentioned a moment ago, if you have a question for the panel, and we definitely appreciate getting your questions answered, please click on the Q&A tab in the Zoom in order to type your questions. We will be getting to all of your questions during Q&A, and if we do not get to it on air, then the panelists have agreed to answer the questions offline. Please do not use the chat for questions as we're primarily using the Q&A tab. With that, let's talk with the panelists. So, first of all, panelists, welcome. We're really excited. Thank you for joining us today. when we talk about digital transformation, one of the things that we kicked off with is what does digital transformation even mean, and how does it impact our work? How do you view and approach digital transformation? So with that, Sarah, can you help the audience out a little bit with that one?
Absolutely, Larry. And I'll go back to something you said, that it means different things to each of us in different scenarios. So there's no right or wrong answer here. For me, digital means three things: the technology itself, right? The electronic information, electronic data. You've got engaging with customers through a digital medium, and then a new way of work, right? How it impacts work, I think, is completely different. So how I view and approach digital transformation, there are three ways that I would answer this in terms of mindset shift, strategic planning shift, and way of work shift. Now, transformation means that there is a need to change. So in that mindset shift, there needs to be this business technology collaboration. And it's really about that trust. And for me, one of my mantras is, it's not what I say, it's what I do. And that's how I engender trust as I move forward in any change. Then continuing on in that mindset shift is, for me, again, in nonprofit land, it's about that human experience powered by digital solutions, right? That impact for the human who is experiencing what digital can bring to them, and an abundance mindset, thinking about what could that impact be, what could that result be for that human. And then with strategic planning, going back to, it's around that business and technology together. For me, I go back to sort of business 101. What's our combined vision, our combined mission, our combined goals, our combined strategy, which then drives into a new way of work. So human-centered design, innovation lens, agile product management, those are all ways that I approach digital transformation that changes the way that we do work.
Tom, what about you?
When I worked at the last company I worked on, we made some major changes in the processes with digital. And it all was driven by the business. What were their needs that were driving digital transformation? And we made some major changes on the infrastructure side. And so I'm coming from my approach anyways, I was the application guy. I had my hands in with the process and building the technology. So from a digital transformation standpoint, I was working on implementing a new e-commerce system, and I was integrating, SAP to a new CRM Salesforce. So I was working with all the teams, with the business, and driving transformation itself.
Excellent. I mean, so Julio, do you have a different take at all?
Well, in my case, one of the things that I want to start with is on the approach is digital transformation mean different things in different organizations and on different areas of the organization. So, but at the end, what we are talking about digital transformation is to move those physical processes into digital processes. So make that transition in the company, or when we set up new processes, set those processes with a digital mindset. And the digital mindset is what we can automate, right? We put automation first. We put, what are those new trends where we can put today? We are thinking about digital transformation is how we start incorporating AI in our process, or AR in those processes. A clear example is right now there is the big movement to start using APIs and reusable APIs across the business. So in my case, that is what we are doing today. We are focusing our business and our processes to start using those reusable APIs to fuel this automation and to fuel speed and agility.
Vishal?
Yeah, I think a lot of the speakers have made a lot of great points. I would add maybe three things. One, this is hard. I don't want anybody to walk away from not thinking this is hard. McKinsey says 70% of the companies want digital transformation, only 30% succeed. So if you're going into this with your eyes, go into it with your eyes open because this is going to be hard. Number two, and I think Sarah touched on it, I think you need to think about talent transformation, because if you're going to be on the path to digital transformation, the talent that you have needs to also come up to speed with the power of what is possible, right? And so, given that only 30% of the companies will succeed, you need to think, how do you create your odds to be better by either attracting and hopefully developing the talent you've got, who can think through the business outcomes that the digital transformation can help you achieve. Otherwise, it just becomes another word, another buzzword to go after. The third thing I would say is think very crisply outside in the business metrics that you want that digital transformation to achieve. Let me give you two examples. Let's say, we work, for example, with a lot of state governments. We saw for one of them that it used to take them literally about 4 weeks to migrate a server from what was an on-prem environment to a cloud. And when you really pulled under all the layers and you said all the approvals that were needed, the security policies needed, the compliance was needed, the configuration needed, what can digital transformation do to cut that journey from 4 weeks to maybe 30 minutes? Now, that is a business outcome that a digital transformation can help achieve. And so I would encourage people, when you think of digital transformation, to one, realize the odds are stacked against them. So they need to think through very clearly what business outcomes they'll achieve, and then also have them think through what talent transformation they want to achieve to further increase their odds and actually drive not just a digital transformation, but a business transformation that the digital transformation helps drive.
Beautiful. So, as we're talking about this, one of the things that we've talked about is that, what's a particular example, one thing that's worked well for you to consider, that you consider it a win? Tom, can you help us with this one?
Yeah, actually I have a couple. And the panelists, as they just spoke, mentioned a few of the wins that I've worked with over the last couple of years. And the first win was we introduced Agile. So when I was doing the SAP to Salesforce integration and building 30 plus interfaces, we introduced Agile. We had Scrum meetings every day starting 8 o'clock in the morning and driving, which we've never ever done before. The team had to get used to getting up, one, that early, and two, to listening to kind of me barking at them. What are you going to get done today? And it was not that bad because all the IT resources reported to me, but it was a huge learning and a big change curve. And the other thing that worked out really well was, in order to put Agile in, I had to change the entire DevOps process because our DevOps process was not working well. I changed change control process, the development process, production release process. I changed the whole entire end-to-end process on how are we going to push this through and get changes done much, much quicker. So on the SAP side, that change control process was much longer. Using Agile, we were pushing out stuff every week and sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, depending on what the change was. And the other thing that was mentioned was hiring great resources. My entire SAP team was offshore, and to do the e-com integration, so I also built an e-com integration with the 30 plus interfaces, and I hired a really smart SAP consultant, and he was on site. So he was the only on-site person I had. Everybody else was offshore. So that helped me out immensely. Just bringing him in and brainstorming instead of, I'd lose my team 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I had somebody to drive and talk to me all day long. So we had a lot of different changes, and putting the Agile and the DevOps process in place, it gave peace of mind to the business, and it gave them faith, because our prior to making these changes, I was getting a lot of kickouts in the DevOps process and change control. with the change control going in and putting more stringent processes in place, we didn't have one mishap at all, and gave the business peace of mind and faith in IT that we could deliver really good quality output.
Very good. Sarah, can you add to that?
Yeah, I can't say enough about Agile. Tom, I completely agree. And Vishal had mentioned, change is hard. And when you look at changing, you need to have quick wins and value to the business. And Agile provides a way to do that, right? When you have minimal viable products moving out, you have the most critical pieces of value to the business quickly. And then moving back a step, whenever anybody comes to me around, well, I want this feature or function for technology, it's like, no, stop. Let's talk about the business, like Vishal had said, right? And let's talk about what you're trying to accomplish. And then adding in their Agile, like Tom had said, it's like that you can iterate fast. When you get that MVP out there, you know that you are not necessarily doing internally what you think is right, but you're doing for your users what is right, because they're telling you through the Agile process what is added. And you're very quickly on these sprints, just continually adjusting. And in that, you have data points, right? Results and actionable insights. Two things that more mantras, I have lots of them, around data and actionable insights. If you didn't measure it, it didn't happen. And if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And Agile is such a great way to be able to take both of those things, measure it so you can show your value, and measure it so you can improve on it. I can't say enough about Agile and how much I believe that can help a business through digital transformation.
Absolutely. Vishal, what about you?
Yeah, no, I'd love to. I think my fellow panelists have done a tremendous job. So there's not a whole lot I can say from what Sarah and Tom said. Just two things I'll add, maybe building on what Sarah and Tom were saying. One, on Agile, I'll give you some example of metrics that would be very helpful for people to leverage. For example, Agile has hundreds of metrics, but I think for each environment, you have to decide what's going to really make a difference. In the engineering side, one of the metrics that we have really leveraged is commit versus delivered. Because what it does for you is you sort of see for each Scrum team what the commitment was and what percentage of delivery was. And if you can maintain it at that 80% or higher, then you're getting good at predicting things, and you're not like saying, I'm going to get all of these story points done, and then later on you find it never happens, right? And teams go through a level of maturity. And this is also a good example of things that you can trend over time. So not only can you look at this metric in an absolute way, you can trend over time and saying, are you becoming better at doing what you said you will do, right? And so it's a great example of being able to both measure and improve. The second thing I would add to this is from an outcome perspective. For example, we do a lot of work in security. In security, one of the biggest problems has been it takes people a long time to even know they've been breached. How can you do anything when you don't even know you have a problem? In fact, it turns out it takes people almost 240 days, believe it or not, to know. Many times FBI has to come and tell them, hey, by the way, your data is on the dark web. You have been breached. That's how they know. So one of the things we did when we were faced with this problem is, something we called as dynamic isolation, where we said, the moment we figure out something has happened, instead of going through all the change control and figure out what to do, can we proactively, if we think there's a suspicious activity, we don't know if we are breached, but if we can detect there's a suspicious activity, maybe somebody's running a scan, maybe somebody's doing some transfer that they shouldn't be, can we immediately isolate that asset in maybe 30 seconds or less, while then we investigate that was there a real problem? This way we make sure the problem doesn't spread, because typically people will steal your credentials and go out. And so why I brought that example up for digital transformation is, part of the digital transformation is not just the how, but the what. What are the problems that are important to solve? And then I think with Agile, with AI, with all of those things, you can solve those problems and create real outcome.
Julio, you have anything to add on wins?
Yes. So and more wins, or what really worked well for me, and is beside what was expressed here in the panel, one thing that I would like to add is a key thing for me was to, and I summarize this, is to gain commitment. Is every time that we build a solution that we want to start a program, build that commitment with the business and across all the teams that that solution will impact. And that was a key for the success to achieve what Vishal just said, right? How we can get to that 80 plus of achievement of things on commit to delivery. And the commit to delivery is based on what is the pressure you have the business for what things to deliver. So what really work is to get that involvement at the beginning, the set of expectations from the business, from the team, about what is going to be that MVP, what is going to be what we're going to deliver with this program, and when we expect to deliver. If you gain that commitment at the beginning, that is my biggest win in this. You get the commitment, you align everybody. Now everybody is shooting on the same direction, and that is probably the biggest win.
That's a great point. You know, so Vishal, you mentioned, I'm going to quote you back to you, 70% of people want to go and transform digitally, and 30% of them succeed, I believe is what you said. With that in mind, there's at least 40% that we can say didn't succeed. So my next question would be really around, so we talked about what you would consider a win. What's one thing that hasn't worked well for you now, and now that you use as a lesson learned?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And, you know, I think it's always hard to acknowledge the problems versus talk about the wins. And so the one thing that didn't work for me, this is, you know, when I was at Cisco, I had taken on a very large team. And sometimes when you take on a much larger team than what you're accustomed to, you have to also think about how are you going to do things differently. And so the piece that I realized eventually from that experience was, you know, part of digital transformation, remember I talked about talent transformation? In the past, the talent that I was transforming was more in the existing team. And I realized that, you know, you have to also look objectively at the team and find out what the gaps are, which, you know, you cannot really teach people, where you have to actually bring also some of the talent from the outside. And so in that particular instance, I think that was the big learning. And I would say, you know, once you know what is worth solving in digital transformation, and then you have the right talent that is enabled to do it, your chances of success go up dramatically, because now you've got the excitement of, hey, this would be a great thing to solve. And now you have people who are knowledgeable and motivated enough to solve for it.
Absolutely. Tom, what about you? I know that you've never been part of anything that didn't succeed, but a little sarcasm there. But at the same rate, you know, what's something that you've managed to get a lesson learned out of?
Yeah, and the two major implementations that I just worked on, the biggest issue that I had on both sides was data. Good quality customer. It was really around the customer, integrating into Salesforce, from SAP to Salesforce and to Pardot, their marketing tool. And when we started that project, they had 200,000 customers, and they didn't even know which ones were active. And there was 3 global master data teams around the world touching that data without any data standards at all. So my biggest hurdle was starting to create data standards. What's an active customer? And then standardizing and cleansing over 200,000 customers, which we brought from 200,000 down to about 50,000 active, and then syncing those between 3 systems that were loaded with data 2 years prior and never integrated. So I had I'll say a hornet's nest right to start out of the gate. Took me 1.5 years to sync those systems, just to integrate those systems. And the other piece of that was what big lesson learned was getting buy-in from the top management to get them to understand that good quality data, which drives all your reporting, majority, right? You're reporting off of data, how critical it is in your systems. And then getting them buy-in to have the teams help me clean it, because IT doesn't own data, right? We own the systems, the business owns the data. So that was the biggest lesson that I learned was getting support up above to push the teams to help me clean it.
There you go. Julio, what about you? I know failure is not something that you utter. I'm originally from Houston, Texas, so failure is not an option is kind of one of my favorite quotes, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, but failure not, but learnings, right? Because that is always, you have a learning, and because normally you recover from those bumps over the road, and you get over them. One of the, normally is us as leaders, we have always to struggle to how we balance process, people, and uh, tools and the technologies. And one of the things when you are thinking about DevOps, once you release that is, okay, the support. And what been the trend in the industry and more in big companies are, let's outsource everything, right? Do managed services and take care. So we outsource that to vendors. Those vendors normally try to find the best talent at the lower cost to be able to maximize their profit. And right now is well known, India offers really good talent at lower cost. So you end up outsourcing to India. And in our case, is the big learning is we used to outsource 100% of our personnel. And now if you are then fighting this, that, okay, everything goes, if you have somebody in India, they have to work the night shift. Now you have that, rotation of personnel, that crunch, that people that stay with you 3-4 months until he can find something, and the regular daytime. So you face that if you want somebody working Eastern time, US, or if not, you have the personnel until probably 10 in the morning, US, and that was a big learning. So for us was to find that mix of offshore, we call India, and onshore, and work with our providers to have that that blend, right? 60-40, 70-30, depending of what process or what solution or what tools we needed to support. So that was the big learning, to move from that 100% out of India to some blend between US, India, on-site. So find that right mix.
Absolutely, with resourcing always being a challenge. Sarah, what about you?
So for me, I'd say one of my biggest lessons learned was the space and pace of change. The example that I'll give is, so before my nonprofit career, I was 17 years in for-profit in IBM. And one of the largest initiatives I'd ever been put in charge of was to take 16,000 developers from a lab and engage them with customers. And so 16,000 spread across a portfolio across IBM. And I recall just spreading us way too thin, not doubling down in high impact areas, not stopping work, too long term, no quick wins, right? I mean, and learned pretty quickly from this. And so pulled people together in at the time it was called ACT, Accelerated Change Together, and now Design Thinking, a predecessor to Design Thinking, and really trying to understand, like, what do our customers need? And I recall one of the areas that we doubled down on was they wanted technical demos. They couldn't get that necessarily from the people they were interacting with. And so they really wanted deep dive technical demos from the developers in the lab creating what they were using. And so we spun up a web portal of technical demos, of hundreds and hundreds of technical demos. So what I learned from that is really doubling down, coming in, stopping work, because you have to create the space for change. So like at Year Up, I stopped 50% of projects, 30% of maintenance work, and because you had to create that space for change. And once you create that space, you can then accelerate the pace in which you take that change because you've created the space for that. And those quick wins are so valuable because you only have a certain amount of time to get your collaboration, your partners, your business partners trust in doing this together. And if you're taking years to create value, that's not going to work. So that pace has to accelerate to create that value in that space that you fashion for yourself.
That's a great example as well. I mean, I think that applies to most of us in our business life of when do you put the brakes on in order to be able to hit the gas. So, you know, it is an interesting example. You know, Julio, one of the things that you said a minute ago was how important that corporate buy-in or the getting everyone on the same page. You know, with that said, you know, how do you approach, you know, finding that business value for the business when it comes to digital transformation?
Well, that really good question, right? How we can show value to the business, and really is how the business realize this digital transformation is delivering value. And one of the things that I found is that the business realized that by when you can deliver by the speed of delivery, but the speed not just delivery for delivery, but also quality delivery, thing that they can use. And piggyback on Sarah before is to say, okay, what they can use using Agile, what is the MVP? What is that, the speed of that delivery? So, and in order to do that, you have to sit down with the business and start defining what are the tangible elements for that, what are those tangible metrics, and also the intangible metrics. And when you can define that, you start defining what is the value that all this transformation is going to provide to the business. Let me give you an example. For example, you can be automating a quoting process on an ERP. Normally, quoting is done in Excel. And is, okay, how fast I can deliver that? What are the tangible that you're going to get by that automation? Okay, now we're doing in Excel. We get the quote is accepted, and now we have to retype that into the ERP to be able to process that quote, right? In the quote to order process. So that is very tangible. But there are some intangible elements that you have to define with the business. So for them to understand, okay, but what are those intangible elements there? Okay, are those all sides? So you're gonna have, by automating that process, now will start having data that you didn't have before. Now you're gonna know how many times that quote has to be redo, right? Or until you get accepted. Was 1, 2, 3, 5 times? How long it took from the first quote to the last quote? So all those are intangible elements that we also provide value to the business. A great value because they can adjust the workforce, they can adjust forecasts, and also not just to the business itself, but also for operation, for manufacturing. Now they can adjust their planning. So it's very important to sit down, and that is doing right at the beginning of the process to start showing that to the business. And that is the way that I approach value, is to showing the business what this transformation is going to provide to them. Many times the business doesn't know, and it's easy to say to get that done, right? And you have to guide the business about what they are getting. And that is challenging because sometimes I see myself as the operation manager from the business, basically telling them how to do, you know, or what will be the advantage if they do this or that with their work, or if they implement this solution or program.
Well, it's funny that you say that. I mean, you know, I was just thinking as you were talking, the difference between all of our panelists, you know, with you being in pharmaceuticals, definition of value, it could be more clear or less clear depending on what you're working on. You know, Sarah, with you being at Year Up and soon to be Save the Children, you know, looking at business value, how do you look at it?
I'm going to go back to the beginning around how I approach digital transformation in terms of the human experience, right? So in nonprofit, it's about that social impact. And so the humans that we're talking about, that we're impacting, is really how we need to measure. So for us, I call it customer engagement, but customer could be multiple people, right? It could be children, it could be students, it could be corporations that are trying to help the students or the children. So that customer engagement is one way of value. Staff productivity. I mean, in nonprofit land, so when I made the transition from for-profit to nonprofit, I had a very hard lesson to learn of where in for-profit, I thought I had constrained resources and I didn't know what that really meant until I moved into nonprofit and really didn't have the breadth and depth of resources at my fingertips. And so staff productivity is so crucial in nonprofit because things get done by the blood, sweat, and tears of people's passion. Yeah. And so really giving them something in terms of how you can help them make an impact in their mission is another way to add value. And of course, the one that stands the true test of time over for-profit and nonprofit is return on investment. Everybody cares about that return on investment. So that is absolutely the third way that I look at value.
And, you know, real quick, Vishal, I mean, do you look at it any differently?
So I think I look at it from an input and output perspective, right? The inputs might be the efforts that you're applying. And is that becoming better and better over time, right? We talked about this concept of productivity, right? So if you were doing, let's say one particular team could do 10 function points in the past, and next year they can start doing 11, right? Now it's a higher productivity as we discussed, you know, maybe you have a goal of continuous improvement. So that's on the input side. Can you make things more predictable? Can you drive quality to be better? Can you drive lower bugs, better productivity? The output is more interesting. So the output could be things, I'll give you an example. You know, we make platforms for what we call as digital workplace services, which is, you know, when you're working in a company and you want, you know, let's say you have a problem, right? How do you get help from, let's say, IT, from, let's say, a device problem or an application problem or whatever, right? So in the past, what has happened is people will call a call center that takes up a lot of time to resolve. And so we're focused on a metric like, okay, what is the, you know, what we call as level 1 calls, the automation we can give to the level 1 calls, because here, if you're able to automate it, it's a win-win, right? It's a win for the user because they're not having to wait. They're getting their problem, whether it's a password reset or I need the software, whatever, instantly. And it's a win for the company because they're reducing their costs. For example, we kept a metric saying we want to increase the level of automation from 10 to 20%. The team was actually able to deliver 25%, but underneath it was actually a true win-win, and not just, okay, lower cost, but also better service.
Nice. Tom, anything to add to that?
Yeah, for what I integrated the last couple of years, it was dealing with the output, really. When I worked with the subject matter experts, and normally they had at least two screens, big ones on their desks, one looking at SAP data, one looking at Salesforce data, because the data was 2 years old and not integrated. So their jobs were very, very cumbersome. So as soon as we integrated that data, they did not even look at that second screen. They had everything at their fingertips, and they started doubled their output, productivity, and then they started training all the teams to use the system because everybody really hated it and no one wanted to use it. So in the end, we started getting our enhancement list grew tenfold because all of a sudden they're using the system and they want to see all this data. Give me all this data now. And they ended up loving it, and their output. And we had to do a lot of retraining. So I was really focused on the output, talking to the subject matter experts who really use the system and use them vocally for upper management to, you know, vocalize, you know, how great did that project really do in the end.
Makes sense. And I also want to do a little time check for everybody. We have a couple more questions to get through before we go into Q&A. And we've got a good amount of questions coming from the panel, from the audience. So I want to make sure we get to those as well. So with that, you know, Vishal, you know, one of the things that I think comes up a lot is how emerging fits in with all of this. And so, you know, what are some of the emerging digital solutions that you're evaluating or implementing? And how can advanced technologies like AI accelerate digital transformation? Do you have any examples?
Sure. I think the time for AI is now. You know, if there's one thing I want the people to take away, you know, when I joined Unisys about 2.25 years back, we had none of the products using AI. We really try to develop a capability and kind of, I don't want to say put fear of the God in the team to say, if you don't have AI, you're going to be legacy, right? I wanted to make a very bold statement and to spur action Obviously, we had to think about, how do you get data? How do you clean the data? How do you derive the insights? But now 2.25 years later, we have 4 products that have leveraged AI. Our emerging technology CTO got awarded as the, in my team as the AI Executive of the Year, which is fantastic, as a finalist for that. The 2 examples that I gave are all actually powered by AI. So for the level 1 automation that I was mentioning, that where we were able to drive from 10 to 25%, there what we were using was NLP, natural language processing, that was classifying what was being said in the particular call into, which is the right resolver group to go to, and getting it done at a probability which was high enough that yielded a great outcome for us. The second place where we have seen AI being very effective is to reduce complexity. For example, we do a lot of work in cyber, and cyber is notoriously complex, has literally billions of bits of data. And how do you leverage AI to automatically classify what network you have, what those things do, what the security policies should be, so the human could just say yes, and those policies can get applied, versus trying to figure out everything yourself. And so I would say, AI is very good at pattern recognition, is very good at classifying, very good at NLP. Data is the new goal. And so really leverage the data, clean the data, build the competency to leverage AI, because the companies who will not do that will put themselves at a disadvantage.
Absolutely. Julio, can you add to that?
What systems? So right now we're working. We have an interesting project, and on the line of Vishal, using AI. And as in many companies, one of the biggest source of ticket opening for our help desk is password reset. So what we are doing is we are using AI to automate the password reset via text messaging. And that is most for our workforce that is outside of the office, that sometimes has difficulties connecting to the internet. So now we are automating the systems via SMS. So the whole process for resetting the password, unblocking the password, can be done using basically your cell phone and sending a text message through regular SMS text saying I want to reset my password, and then the AI will take care from there and start doing all the validations, all that validation that you hear. Okay, give me your address and all that. I start learning the patterns, and then checking that against our databases to the point that will allow the password reset, or if there is somebody trying to do something fishy, redirect it to our security team.
Sarah, real quick, I want to kind of jump the topic real quick off of emerging and get into, how have the impacts of COVID-19 influenced, digital transformation in 2020?
Yeah, I mean, in IT, we all had to do things differently, right? When we went to virtual operations, now above any time was the time for IT to shine, right? Given all of us moving into virtual operation. And in that, I found 3 things that I've really been influenced in changing my way of thinking. The first one is just an overall strategic framework. So earlier I had said double down, right? So I've always been like that, 5 big rocks. What are our 5 big rocks? That was completely inflexible in COVID-19. That whole strategy went out the window, right? We had to back up, and now heading into 2021, I'm going to go with more of like a run, grow, transform, with like the grow and the transform pieces being very, very flexible in that framework, and run being, you just have to do this, right, to keep the lights on. Technology is the second one, design for change, right? So even just going way deep into architecturally looking at what your business is like. This now above any time is when I'm thinking component architecture is a way for us to really be thinking, but then you have to start thinking about the trade-offs between latency versus flexibility. But and it's different for each one of us in different industries, but I think it would be helpful for nonprofits to go into this component architecture land to design for change. And the third one is money. Oh man, like my budget went all over the place during COVID-19. Like things that I thought I wouldn't be spending in, like procuring thousands of laptops for students, Had no idea I was going to be doing that. And now looking into 2021, just how do I think of budget differently in terms of giving me that flexibility, building in different kinds of contingencies. And then also, and I know this is very specific to nonprofit, but IT becoming a revenue shop. We were able through COVID-19 to bundle tech solutions for donor pitches, which was really an exciting place to be for IT, actually generating revenue itself as a shop. So those are the three ways that I've really changed my thinking based on COVID-19.
It's really about, you know, the speed of change, the acceleration of change, how fast you need the change to keep up with the business. And also, how do you manage risk? How do you manage risk dealing with governance, risk, compliance, security, legal, regulatory changes? You know, GDPR comes at you from, say, California really, really fast, and you've got to go change how you protect that and how you store it. And the fines are really pretty steep now if you don't follow those guidelines. You know, how do you protect and manage all the data when you've got all these people working from home? You know, IT had to jump up and shine really, really fast. All of a sudden, you've got an entire working force. You need to update your servers because all of a sudden, you got your entire staff now working from home. Your servers, you may have to go to, say, plug AWS. You know, change the way you're doing business. It changed a lot the way we do business day to day now.
Let me go to the Q&A section, and of course, your discussion has ignited a lot of thoughts in the audience mind, which we
That's
can see
fine.
from the number of questions coming in. So the first question is from Utpal Kapadia, and he wants to know, for any CIO or stakeholder, right, what are some of the parameters that should be used to, you know, how to budget and set some measurable milestones for digital transformation journey? So Sarah, you want to take that?
Yeah, I was just thinking through how I explain how I just talked about looking at your budget differently. So I better darn well be able to answer this question. So the way that I'm going to go back to that run, grow, transform. You know, in your run bucket, you really should be able to understand like what you need to do to keep your business running. Just if you stop this, your business will break, in other words, right? And just make that your bottom line and make sure you budget for that. In the grow and transform buckets, when you're in digital transformation, there's this cone of uncertainty that opens up, right? So in grow, it's a little bit more uncertain, and transform, it's very, very uncertain. So go into it with, my recommendation is to go into it with like levels of confidence. And the way that I'm actually approaching my 2021 budget right now is to create these buckets of contingencies around, yes, I know some of these things are on the roadmap, but there are these contingencies that I think are going to come. And I have this level of confidence, and then build those in, and you can, they're flexible, right? Because you can give it up if you need to, although hopefully you don't have to. And then, or you can use it based on business and impact ROI. And so as a business and IT together, you then can combine how you look at that money and spending it across your entire enterprise. So that's my recommendation. I have not done it yet, right? That would be the 2021 in terms of doing it that way. So I'm hopeful that it'll be successful.
Yep, absolutely. Contingency plan has always been important, and COVID has, you know, signified how much more important it is. And yeah, next question is for Tom. So Tom, how did you manage to convince the business to realize how important it is to have quote unquote clean data?
Good question. So when we couldn't do the integration, so when they gave us these projects, said, hey, you know, build the SAP integration, Salesforce, and build the integration to e-commerce. One of the first, we took a look at the data, because that was one of the first integrations that we did, and we presented to the business, and they already knew how bad the data was already. So there wasn't a lot of convincing for them to convince them. It was one, getting a budget and the time and the resources from the business, and what business projects potentially were going to have to be put on the shelf, or how are we going to manage when I gave somebody 50,000 customers to go cleanse, you know, that their eyes just popped out of their head. It was really working with the business and trying to get resources. And I was very fortunate to find a salesperson who had been with the company for 20 to 30 years, who knew every customer and every piece of machinery. And I had really lucked out, and he was my saving grace, actually.
Nice. So you had your job a little easier then. Got it. So
It wasn't easy, I'll tell you.
of course,
It wasn't easy.
got it. So we have two questions from Anil Kurian, and let me combine them both and pose it to Vishal. So how can the transformation team engage the stakeholders and keep up the momentum? So Vishal, can you take that?
Yeah, and it's a great question, Anil, because I think the key to the transformation, and somebody said it earlier, is building trust. And the way you build trust is by building a relationship. And so I think what you have to do is to think through who the stakeholders are and what is the communication cadence that is needed to those stakeholders. And how do you create a spirit of transparency with them, both with things that are going well and also, more importantly, with the things that are not going well. A lot of times people just, they make the error of only talking about the wins, and then the stakeholders will get to hear the losses or the problems from other places, and you lose credibility. And so I think the right approach is really three things. One, think through who the stakeholders are, and they may be broader than you think. Number two, come out with a communication cadence, whether it's in person, whether it's an email update, but have something as a combination of the two. And three, have a dashboard which is transparent and also talks about the problems and not only about the wins.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Vishal. I think it's very helpful coming up with the communication cadence, especially. Yep. And so let me pose this to Julio, since he was talking about some of the projects with AI. So we have a question, we have a very futuristic question from Vaibhav. So Julio, what does the future of digital transformation look like?
The future of digital transformation looks like.
Yeah, interesting.
I think it's like with after COVID, what we are going to see and what I expect to see, very difficult to predict the future, but what I expect to see is a hyper acceleration on all the transformation projects. And one of the future is we're gonna see a lot of AI and a lot of AI to provide intelligence on to aid to help business decisions. And right now with AI, augmented reality, you're gonna see that probably on the production floors, on the manufacturing floors, a lot of AR. So to aid those workers to quickly find information on the spot based on the task they are performing. And coming back to also to the analysis, more to the virtual world, is to the analysis of unstructured data. Today, with artificial intelligence, we have a huge opportunity to start drawing conclusions from this huge pool of unstructured data. And I think that is what is going to be coming, and what the business has to be ready, and us on the technical side of IT be ready to provide those technologies to aid those decisions.
Great. Thanks, Julio. I know we just have 3 minutes, but let me take the liberty and go ahead and ask one more question before we wrap up the event. So yeah, so Vishal, you spoke about how what is the percentage of the organizations that are getting succeeded in their digital transformation initiatives. So this is an anonymous question. So what are the barriers that are usually blocking the path to transforming digitally?
I think there are 3 or 4 big barriers that block the path. It's not typically the desire, it's the ability. It's like, everybody says they want to go to a great college, but not everybody can. So it requires a lot of persistence, a lot of planning, a lot of execution. And so let me kind of put out what some of those barriers would be. Number one, I think, is really the digital transformation, where is it in the list of priorities, right? Because every organization can only do maybe 2 or 3 things well. And so, is this something that's just coming from IT? Is this something that's coming all the way from CEO and the board? So sort of defining what is the priority of it, where does it sit in the list of everything else the organization needs to achieve, and what actually defines it, because it's a very conceptual word. What are the actual outlines around it, I think is the first barrier, because without that clarity, if you don't know where you want to go, you're not going to get there. Once you have outlined that at the highest level and you've got the organization somewhat motivated, the second part rests into capability, right? The technical capability, which we discussed around talent transformation, as well as business capability in terms of defining those metrics, those use cases. For example, is it a customer's journey that you're trying to transform in the banking world? And what would be different, and what will be the amount of upsell, and how quickly the NPS scores will change, and so on, right? And so the second bit is you've got the thing defined. Now you've got the business and the technologists with the right talent working hand in hand as an integrated team trying to drive the company towards the talent transformation. The third part of it, I would say, is the program management and the communication piece we were saying, because there is natural resistance to change. People say the only person who likes change is a baby with a wet diaper, right? So now, given that change resistance, how do you understand the stakeholders? How do you have those quick wins? How do you turn them to be an advocate for you? How do you become open to also hearing negative feedback and coming out with the risk and the mitigation strategy for those risks? So it's not all just go, 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 right? And so I think if you can put all these 3 things together, around the sponsorship from the top, around clear use cases and metrics, around the talent transformation, around strong program management and communications, then I think you increase your odds significantly.
Very good.
Great for structuring your answer and giving those 3 or 4 barriers for the digital transformation. And I would love to go over more questions, but I'm sorry, audience, we are running out of time. So with that, I will hand over to Deepali for her closing comments, and as we promised earlier, the questions that were unanswered, we'll get them answered and share with you all via email.
And Rupesh will be answering them.
Now I am a digital transformation expert.
Wow. Wow, that was a wonderful session, panel members. Thank you so much for sharing your years of experience and all of it. So on behalf of Precision Technologies, I would like to thank you guys very much for your valuable time. Audience, thank you so much for your participation. It now encourages us to bring in more such interesting events. But I think, next time, Rupesh, we should plan this for 90 minutes. Because such interesting topics, especially, too many questions. So I think we can add more value. Larry, wonderful moderation. Thank you. All of us, please follow us on our social handles and stay connected with us. Please feel free to reach out to us if there is anything that we can help you with. And of course, for the questions, we are going to get back to you. And of course, if you need to know more about us, feel free to reach out to us as well. With that, we are going to conclude this session. Have a great week ahead, everyone. Thank you.